100 inhabitants of Mahon at that time. Some 850 were taken as slaves, never to be seen again. Some 350 were killed trying to defend their families from being taken from them and their wives from being raped, and a few that were left just disappeared into the countryside. In fact, the whole town was razed to the ground. It was the British times of the 18th century before the Mahon started to be rebuilt. But because of that single event, the King of Spain ordered a castle be built at the entrance of the harbour of Mahon to protect it from further attacks. And as that castle was started to be built on the feast day of St. Philip, it became known as Castel de San Felipe, St. Philip's Castle. We believe the building of that castle was a definitive turning point of the fortunes of this island. It took 25 years to be built and fully armed and manned, and luckily so, because literally 25 years later another much greater attack was once again attempted on Mahon. This time they say that some 300 sails were sighted on the horizon. And with those little ships of that era, one lateen sail, and assisted by 2 decks of oarsmen, some 50 oars on either side and 5 men on each oar, that would have amounted to over 25,000 men. They were carrying dozens of pieces of artillery and cavalry horses. They tried once more to enter the narrow entrance of the harbour Mahon, but they were beaten back by those newly installed guns. Instead, they sailed around the northern side of Menorca and came to this city, the capital city of Ceutadella, with absolutely devastating results on this city. In 1558, Ceutadella de Menorca had some 5,000 inhabitants. On seeing those ships on the horizon, all those peasants and farmers from surrounding areas fell back to within the walls too. Very large, very high walls, and a 10-day siege took place, under continuous bombardment by those artillery pieces, until one day the Turks broke through those walls, and those 25,000, went on the rampage. 3,552 prisoners were taken to Constantinople, today's Istanbul, as slaves. Many had been killed defending their families. They also looted all their livestock and food, their treasures, and very importantly, not only for Ceutadella, but also the people of Menorca, they took away the Libra Vermilion. Since scribes had first started to write, they'd kept a day-to-day record, a diary if you like, of all the major events and laws that had been passed, the sales and purchases of land, and the births, deaths, marriages of the nobility. They were all contained in that red book. The amazing thing is that literally 5 years later, a notary and a priest managed to raise a small amount of money as a ransom from the rest of the people of Menorca, set sail that long journey to Constantinople, as it would have been in those days, and managed to purchase the release of the vast majority of those prisoners. They say only a handful had died during their long journey there, their 5 years of enslavement and a long journey back. They couldn't get back all their treasures, etc., but they did get back the Libra Vermilion. That red book is now locked in the archives of the City Hall, and although it's in Latin, it's from translations of that red book that we guides of Menorca get a definitive history of until the 16th century that we can relate to you. They say it was over 100 years before the townspeople here picked themselves up, dusted themselves off and started all over again. Even successive governors had to live in caves once more. And when they did start to rebuild their city, they could only go by the memories of their grandfathers and fathers before them as to how it had been. So on the site of the old Medina, or shopping area as it had been, they didn't bother to clear away all the various rubbish, rubble and foundations of the old buildings. They just raised the pavements over the top and put Arab arches over the top of those, with little medieval houses meeting almost in the middle of the winding streets. It's now called St. Volta's, is the main pedestrian shopping area. The cathedral, which had been newly completed prior to that attack, was once again rebuilt using the original plans. It was finally completed during the 19th century, partially destroyed again during the Spanish Civil War of 1936-1939, and because of the work that was done by the local people to try and bring it back, refurbish it in the 1940s, it was visited by Pope Pius XII in 1954 when he declared it a basilica. The governor's house, which had previously to the Spanish being here been the Arab governor's house, was once again rebuilt in that style you see all the way along the North African coastline. The Arab arched facade with a castellated top. It's now the city hall and the main local police station. Then, towards the end of the 17th century, many of those, or some of those 6 noble families started to build their palaces. But much more at the beginning of the 18th century, financed by the British for help in allowing Great Britain to take this island without any loss of life in 1708, those families built palaces. And there are 8 palaces in today, 6 noble families, but as older sons married out into other noble families, they too built themselves palaces. And then 199 years after that terrible happening, which is still literally commemorated every July here, and this lays bit to the mañana syndrome of the Spanish, but then the Menorquians have never been Spanish, have a different culture, different head on their shoulders to the Spanish. It was supposed to be for the 200th anniversary, but finished a year early. An obelisk was put up in the main Bourne Square. Along the bottom in Latin, Jose Maria Cuadrado, one of Menorca's classical writers of the 19th century, wrote a small epitaph. In fact, there's a bust of Jose Maria